Hello! Today's stories come from r/ProRevenge. We've got 3 stories of combat boot sized ProRevenge, including our last, which came from a viewer. First up is Want some free gas? I gotcha, bro. Hope this qualifies as ProRevenge. Let me know if it needs removing. So, several years ago, my friend, we'll call him Boris, and I would always help each other do the spring cleanup for our properties. This included taking out damaged trees, preparing garden plots, and taking care of our weed infested yards. I was going to be first on the cleanup detail, so I prepared tools and implements the Friday before the big cleanup was to happen. Sharpening tools and chainsaw chains, lawnmower blade, and just getting everything in order. Among those tasks was mixing gas with 2-cycle oil. Finished up kind of late and generally put things away for the next day. The next morning, Boris shows up with coffee and biscuits around 8 a.m. As we were sitting on his tailgate enjoying breakfast, my neighbors ride by in their beat-to-heck Chevy Cavalier smoking like a freight train. We will call them Rocky and Bullwinkle. Boris and I made the usual jokes about the amount of smoke pouring from the exhaust. Dang, bet they go to the gas station and fill up with oil and check the gas. We soon finished breakfast and thought no more about it. As we begin to get the tools laid out and hash out a plan of attack, I cannot find my gas cans. No mixed gas, regular gas, or a gas can in general. That's when it dawned on us why the car Rocky and Bullwinkle were driving was smoking so bad. I'm fuming, to say the least. Well, all Boris and I could do was go shopping for gas cans, gas, and more 2-cycle oil. After we returned, we saw Rocky and Bullwinkle pass by several times, but all in all, we got a lot done. The next weekend, we dedicated to clean up at Boris's. A weekend or two go by, and we have a family dinner at my wife's, Rocky and Bullwinkle's grandparents'. Toward the latter part of the evening, we were having a few drinks. Most people had left, and myself and wife's grandfather were shooting the breeze when I had to take a leak. As I was doing so, I saw a gas can with very distinct paint on it. I inquired from the old man about how it came into his possession, and he stated Rocky and Bullwinkle left it there. I simply explained it was mine, as was another, and loaded them in my truck. It ate at me every time that POS car with my POS neighbors went by, so I hatched a plan from a rotten egg. I went and bought a few gallons of gas, a few gallons of diesel fuel, and some other various oils. I made a concoction of these different chemicals and filled my new 6-gallon gas can I had to purchase. With some clean gas, I filled the lawnmower and cut some grass that evening, making sure Rocky and Bullwinkle saw me. Then I put everything away, but forgot, and left that rotten egg gas can out. I got up and went to work the next morning and didn't even think to check on the can. But when I got home, I checked, and it was gone. My wife informed me that my plan must have worked as she watched Rocky and Bullwinkle go in and out with the car not only smoking, but spitting and sputtering as well. The last time they rode out, they didn't ride back in. They gave me about an hour of peace before they came over and wanted to know if I could look at the car and see what was wrong. If it could not be fixed on the side of the road, maybe tow it home. My response? I've had a long day and have a migraine. Maybe tomorrow. I saw the panic set in when I told them that. That's when they told me they had no insurance and it was on a main road. Tough luck. So the highway patrol did run across it and had it towed. It was going to cost them around $500 to get it out of impound, plus they had to have current registration and insurance. Car wasn't worth it. Well, they're those type of people that good luck just falls on them, and the pastor for a local church gave them an old Ford Taurus. Took me a few cans of rotten egg gas, but I got the motor to lock up after about a month. This time, it quit in their grandparents' yard. So they scrapped it, and as luck would have it, they got their income tax returns. They bought a nice-looking Ford F-150, but it began having problems too. Smoked really bad. They did take it to a mechanic that eventually found the problem. He got the truck running right again for about $1,500, and I have never had any more gas come up missing. Thanks for reading. It's one thing to be in a pinch and grab some gas from someone. It's quite another to consistently steal. What the heck? Seems to me like OP was sending a message. And if you're thinking or wondering why didn't he say something, you'll get your answer in the comments, where there are a couple more details from OP and some punny funds. Someone said, totaled 2 motors and cost them $2,000 minimum. That's some ProRevenge right there, served cold, just the way it should be. Danish said M said, still took them 2 engines and life out of the F-150 to learn, not the brightest in town. Sweaty Ed added, not the brightest spark plug in the engine block either. Tanaka Sensei said, I'd bet they're about as useful as a spark plug on a diesel engine. God of Atheism shared, wild that they didn't learn somewhere in the middle of the second one. But then again, if they were smart, they probably wouldn't be stealing folks' gas cans. OP replied, well, in all honesty, they were driving junkers anyway. Never did maintenance or anything. Just gas and go. Stormy said, the best part is they did it to themselves too. It's just too bad those cars drank the wrong kind of stolen gasoline and got sick. Just too darn bad. Dang. You know who can drink gasoline and not get sick? Jerry can. Someone else asked, how stupid are they? And why wouldn't you confront them on stealing your property when it first started? I would put up cameras and press charges. OP replied, oh, I did confront them after I found my gas cans at their grandparents'. They just lied, and old grandpa got amnesia about how the cans got to his house. Further confrontation would have just caused me problems, as they were the grandparents' golden boys who could do no wrong. I did eventually install cameras, but it was weeks after the last incident of things going missing. I didn't have any problems after the cameras went up. Really didn't have any problems after they found out the truck had bad fuel. I hope you're standing at attention for our second story. It's titled, Pro-Army Revenge. PAR is par for the course. Edit. Dear reader, I spent the majority of my career in Special Operations Forces, SOF. I carried a gun, not a pen. I am not a writer, nor an editor. I am not forcing anyone to read this saga. I understand it is long, but a too long didn't read will detract from the story. I was told to post here because it is doing well at r/petty revenge, r/malicious compliance, and r/military stories. Dear reader, I had an illustrious 21-year career in the United States Army, which miraculously concluded with an honorable discharge. 21 years and 14 combat deployments produce a lifetime of stories. The overwhelming majority of memories are comical and worth remembering, like the time I borrowed another human's truck, or the time I relocated an artillery display in my barracks room. However, some memories are extra ammunition after a live fire exercise, LFX. Worth donating to Chuck and Barry. Memories suppressed so well they never happened. However, these memories can be unintentionally triggered. I worked at the bad place before attending assessment and selection. Working there was the sole reason for attending selection. The bad place, TBP, was a 3-star command and nursing home for dying careers. TBP was a mixture of National Guard, Army Reserve, active duty, and Department of the Army civilians. It was essentially a foreign planet for a soldier who had grown up in Regiment and the 82nd Airborne Division. Overnight, I had transitioned from airborne infantry to the equipment tracking officer. It was my sole purpose in life to source pre-deployment training equipment, PDTE, for deploying National Guard and Army Reserve units. These units would request specific types of equipment, and it was my responsibility to source at least 2/3 of the requested equipment. I should mention my boss at TBP was Department of the Army Civilian, DAC. I had 10 years of service under my belt, and it was the first time my direct supervisor was a civilian. Now, I had no issues with civilians, but I do have issues with horrible leadership. Mike was horrible. Mike was a dirty diaper full of crap and always on me. Side note, OP Sloppy has a conversation with the reader. I feel the need to mention TBP recently moved. Moved? Yes, deep south one day and the Midwest the next. Aliens? No, base realignment and closure, BRAC. What? The Army decided to close some bases and expand others. Oh, so what's this have to do with the story? There was 2 active duty soldiers and 2 Department of the Army civilians performing the duties of equipment tracking officers in the Deep South. None of them moved, and all continuity was lost. Okay, there had to be some kind of transition though, right? Yes, all 4 of them spent countless hours informing me how terrible of a human Mike was via email. Oh, story time again. Dear reader, I had no earthly idea what my job was or how I was to perform it initially. Making matters worse, I would quickly learn Mike had no earthly idea either. Mike only knew what Z, final product, looked like and was mentally unaware of the other 26 letters in the alphabet. Mike was less useful than a blinker fluid and football bats. Fear not, reader, it only took 3 months of working from 0500 to 2300 to garner a nascent understanding of my roles and responsibilities. Thankfully, I had wonderful counterparts at sister organizations. Furthermore, they were all equally aware of how useful Mike was. Fast forward 4 months. The section was still composed of exactly one sloppy. I was 25% of the total allotted manpower performing 100% of the duties. If you wait until the last minute, it only takes a minute, was my battle cry. Life was grand. I had developed standard operating procedures, SOPs, and automated matrices to assist me. I was even starting to catch errors from the department that validates equipment requests. Note, remember, it was my duty to source 2/3 of the equipment request. I had a very unpleasant one-way conversation in August of 2011. Captain Richard Cranium was requesting I provide 3 Rhino buses for training. Dear reader, I kindly explained why fulfilling this request was unfeasible. Problem solved, right? Nope. I then received a call from Lieutenant Colonel Richard Cranium. I then received a call from Colonel Richard Cranium. The issue quickly became a self-licking ice cream cone of chaos. Ring, ring, ring. The bad place, G4 Equipment Tracking Officer, this is Rank Sloppy speaking. How may I help you, sir or ma'am? This is Major General Richard Cranium from the California National Guard. Side note, civilian readers, the Major General is the boss Richard Cranium for all National Guard soldiers in the state of California. Sloppy does not get calls from general officers, ever. How can I help you, sir? I am calling to inquire as to why you will not fulfill our equipment request. Is it not your policy to provide 2/3? Dear reader, I was now a bit agitated. I had clearly explained the issue to the company commander, the battalion commander, and brigade commander. I now have an irate, God-level commander on the phone, and 2 courses of action are cycling through my mind. I could kindly explain why this request was absurd, or I could go full regiment sloppy. Slot machine sloppy. Pulls lever, wheels spinning, still spinning, regiment sloppy. Sir, I clearly explained to the previous commanders why I cannot fulfill their request and provided other options. I don't want options, rank sloppy. I want my 3 Rhino buses. So I replied with my time to get fired attitude. Roger, sir. Well, as I told the previous commanders, there are only 5 Rhino buses that exist on Earth. 3 of them are deployed to Iraq, and the other 2 are in Afghanistan. Do you wish for me to forward this equipment request to Forces Command? Forcecom, 4-star General? Oh, that won't be necessary, rank sloppy. Are you sure, sir? I mean, I can. No. Did you explain this to every single one of them, sir? Disregard. I have some phone calls to make. Dear reader, the world was right again. At least I thought it was. It appears the Major General was slow to contact his subordinate leadership. The Colonel had contacted Mike demanding I supply his unit with Rhino buses. One would think a simple explanation would suffice for Mike, but one would be wrong. Common sense is an elusive, fickle creature for Mike. It was like trying to explain what number the letter purple tastes like. Did you tell a unit they can't have a piece of equipment? Yes, sir. Why? Because there are only 5 of them and they are all deployed to combat zones. Well, you need to figure out how to get them. So I'm thinking to myself, is this man fracking serious? I think he is. Sir, call the Pentagon and ask them to redeploy them from combat because some unit needs to train with them? It's not your job to validate equipment. It's your job to source it. Do you understand? Paying lip service. Roger that, sir. Dear reader, when one door closes, check for an open window. I had over 90 units on my desk and 30,000 pieces of equipment to source for the month of August. It didn't take long to find a window to crawl out. I found a unique request from an infantry unit. They requested a plethora of equipment, and it all made sense, minus 4 pieces of equipment. So I'm thinking to myself, pretty sure those 4 pieces of equipment need to be on a different type of request, right? Yeah, but it's not your job to validate it. Oh, right. Dear reader, I sourced it, all 4 of them. It was not an easy task either. I literally had to scour the entire country for available inventory. I made phone call after phone call to make this request happen. None of these items were co-located. They would need to be transported from the far stretches of the continental United States, and failure was not an option. I had fulfilled my responsibilities. I sourced the equipment and turned it over to Mike for signature. Mike's signature magically allocates funding and authorizes the transportation of said equipment. Dear reader, dung typically rolls downhill. However, this specific request defied the laws of gravity. Dung was going to roll uphill. I crawled back through the window and waited a month for the fallout to ensue. Truth be told, due to my heavy workload, I had forgotten about my magnificent accomplishment. It was another horrible day at work until I received a magical phone call. Ring, ring, ring! The Bad Place G4 Equipment Tracking Officer, this is Rank Sloppy speaking. How may I help you, sir or ma'am? Hello, I am Sergeant First Class Ricky Bobby. I am the Long Range Surveillance Platoon Sergeant for Unit Name. Hey, Ricky, how can I help you? Well, I am looking at 4 helicopters and I am told I need to sign for them. Me in my yes mode. Let me look at your request. Shuffling noises. Yes, you requested 2 UH-60L Blackhawk helicopters and 2 UH-47 Chinook helicopters, correct? Yes, but I requested them for SPIES, Special Purpose Insertion Extraction System, and FRIES, Fast Rope Insertion Extraction System, training. I am not a pilot. What the heck am I supposed to do with 4 helicopters? Well, I mean, once you sign for them, they're yours. I suppose you could try to fly them? Ugh, Army, suppose I could. Don't worry, man. I've got your back. I have already coordinated with our aviation validators to support your request. I will give you their number. I'm ready to copy. 867-5309. Thanks, man. So I said, call me back if you have any issues, brother. I will walk upstairs, G3 operations, and get this sorted so you boys can do SPIES and FRIES. Wilco, man, aka he will comply. Dear reader, not only does dung roll uphill, but dung rolls uphill faster than I expected. I had just hung up the phone and was departing for lunch. I didn't make it 5 feet before I was beckoned to Mike's office. There are 4 chairs in Mike's office, one with a load-bearing capacity of at least 400 pounds, and 4 normal people chairs. I was awkwardly surprised to find it was already standing room only. The G4 Colonel, Deputy G4 Civilian DAC, and G3 Operations Colonel were already in Mike's office. Mike starts with, "It seems we have an issue, Rank Sloppy." "We? Really? I'm not aware of any issues, sir." "Well, unit name is at Fort Hood and the battalion commander is wondering why one of his platoon sergeants signed for 4 helicopters." Did they request 4 helicopters? I can go get the equipment request. I have it right here in my hands. Okay, did they request? Yes, they did. I don't understand the G4 Colonel steps in. The issue is we needlessly shipped 4 helicopters across the United States. To which G3 Colonel added, there are already helicopters at Fort Hood, helicopters and pilots. They're to support SPIES and FRIES training. They are there specifically for this type of request. G4 Colonel says, Rank Sloppy, did this request not look odd to you? I started laughing hysterically. Absolutely, sir. Everyone else had shocked faces, just baffled as frack. G4 Colonel finally says, then why did you source it? So I retell the entire Rhino Bus saga. Sir, as I understand it, it's not my job to validate, it's my job to source it. Mike made it very clear on multiple occasions. Mike's getting pretty angry at this point. Rank Sloppy, do you realize you just cost the Army over $100,000 to ship equipment we didn't need to ship? Sir, G3 Colonel's getting mad now. No, Mike. You just cost the Army over $100,000. Sir, G4 Colonel's in on it now. Mike, it is your signature that authorizes allocation of money and shipping. Did you tell Rank Sloppy it's his job to source? To not validate anything and only source? Sir, I did, but G4 Colonel starts walking out. Mike, let's have a meeting in my office. I'm thinking to myself, ooh, that sounds bad. Yeah, but Mike, not us, right? I retreat to my desk. Side note, I know the G3 Colonel. We had worked in the same unit when he was a major. G3 Colonel follows Sloppy. Sits on Sloppy's desk. G3 Colonel's laughing hysterically. How in the world did you do it? Do what? Find 4 helicopters? I called everyone. I leveraged my network of contacts and made it my mission. What did your counterparts say about the request? They have the same sentiments towards Mike. Honestly, that's impressive. Sir, I was going to get crapped on either way, so I decided frack Mike. Yep, frack Mike, I guess. Dear reader, thank you for reading my Petty Army Revenge. I have good news. I no longer worked for Mike after that interaction. Other misdeeds and stories came to light after that encounter. I had a long desk side meeting with the G4 colonel and fully detailed my relationship with Mike. It's nearly impossible to fire Department of the Army civilians, but it was easy to move me. The G3 colonel found a more suitable position for an infantryman. It also sucked, but he gave me ample time to prepare for assessment and selection. I was at TBP for 18 horrible months before I found greener pastures. I could lament on all the horrible things, but it's not worth it. Why? At least I know where to go if I ever need 4 helicopters. Cheers. Sloppy. Malicious compliance and pro-revenge really did come together in this story. I would think that any form of revenge in the army would require a strong dose of malicious compliance, though, so this comes as no surprise. Let's check out the comments. OP goes over his curse word replacements, which you might have missed. This is something I am all too familiar with, as I have to do every story myself. Meat Prep said, "Why does the military need the ability to transport rhinos by bus? Wait, do they have a herd of trained attack rhinoceroses as a weapon? That's awesome." OP replied, "We tried to acquire sharks with laser beams, but only found ill-tempered sea bass. Rhinos was the next logical step because the saddles never fit the sloths quite right." Warple still added, "Not the sloth's fault. Was the army's fault for not training riders to ride upside down." OP added, "Freaking knew it." Asian Husky said, "I love how Richard Cranium is the formal speak for dickhead. You had me wondering there for a second why so many people had the same name." OP replied, "Ha, thanks for reading, friend." Someone else said, "Reminds me of the fat electrician videos with his new ways to say cockpit and dictator." Our third story is another from one of our very Owen. Yes, I know, I'm hilarious. It's titled, "I Destroyed a Brewery." Nearly 20 years ago, I was a brewer at a brew pub. The owner was a complete lunatic and an utter butthole. Before I was hired, he had already purchased the brewery equipment used from a closed microbrewery. Problem is, it was literally 4 times larger than it needed to be for the size of the place. And to top it off, he was selling Big 3 beers too. And it was a Pugsley system. Brewers will know. But I made it work, even got the stupid Ringwald yeast to behave. But I only need to brew about 3 or 4 times a month. I have worked at places we brewed that much a week, so I wasn't needed anywhere near 40 hours per week, and I was salaried. So he decided I needed to work night manager at least 2 nights a week to fill out my hours. That was fine. It was an easy gig. After our first year, he advertised a huge anniversary event with specials on food and drink. Food specials, commercial beer specials, and didn't even mention that we made our own, much less put anything on special. Idiot. Not too long after, I got my first vacation in over a year, and he was mad at me for insisting. But life was stressful, not least of which because my mom was in hospice, stage 4 cancer. But her condition was such that she said my wife and I should go. She'll be fine. So we went camping for a week. The day before our trip was to end, we got word she had died. 2 days earlier. My family didn't know how to reach us, only she did. We rushed home, 6-hour drive, and on the way, I called my boss and told him what had happened, and that I probably would not be in on Monday as planned. This was Saturday. I found out later from a bartender that he then complained at the chef that I was probably going to want more time off. I did, in fact, take Monday off, but I went in on Tuesday to do my night manager shift. Now, my mom's wishes were to be cremated with no embalming, so by the time I got home, she was already cremated. So the memorial service was planned for 2 weeks later, right before Labor Day weekend. There was to be a memorial service Thursday and the interment for the family Friday. So I planned and made sure that the servers were full and I wouldn't need to brew for at least a week. That Wednesday, the boss comes and tells me he wants me to work night shift on Thursday and Friday. Normally, I did Tuesday and Wednesday nights, to make up for the time off I'd taken to help my dad out. He wasn't handling it well. He wanted me to come in after my mom's funeral. I flatly refused, at which point he said fine, but I'd have to work a double shift Saturday then. I nearly lost it. I walked away, and after I cooled off, I went back and told him I was no longer going to do the manager shifts and that I wanted to switch to hourly for brewery work only. He was angry, but stuck. He needed me in the brewery. Things started calming down, but after a few weeks, I noticed my paychecks were far less than I anticipated. I hadn't been tracking my clock in or clock out very closely because prior to this, I only clocked in and out so I was logged in to do manager functions. But I happened to have a couple of slips in my wallet, and because I still had manager access, discovered he had been altering my hours, eventually cheating me out of around 20 hours in just 6 weeks. And that's when I hatched my plan. I was done with this butthole. Remember that ringwood yeast? Well, in a brewery, you harvest yeast from a fermenting batch to use to brew a later one. And since we were slow, it often had to be stored for a while before it got used. But you had to use it within 30 days. 21 is better, or it goes sour and starts dying. Normally, I would take other steps to ensure it stayed clean and healthy, but not on the last batch I harvested. It just went into the cold room and stayed there. I stopped going in very often, just logging tank levels to make sure nothing ran out and made him suspicious. I would even go in to make sure he wasn't in that day, and later message him that I'd brewed. I hadn't, and waited. On day 45, after I got the check for the last hours I worked, I overnighted my keys in with a resignation letter. He called me the next day, screaming. I told him I knew what he'd done and I wouldn't be back. I don't know what he looked like when he went into the brewery cellar and discovered he had empty fermenters, nearly empty serving tanks, dead yeast, and almost no grain. Pity, really. After that, he tried to hire my former assistant, who was working at another brew pub by then because the butthole had forced me to fire him to save money. He laughed at him. He then apparently got the underage son of one of the brewers at a nearby brew pub, which he had originally been part of to brew for him, but had to fire him because the kid kept getting caught drunk down in the cellar. So he tried doing it, and I had heard they stopped brewing entirely eventually. About a year after I left, he folded. Staff showed up one morning to padlock doors. Drove through there a few years back. Not only gone, but building was torn down. I felt like stopping to sow the ground with salt, but I was in a hurry. Oh my goodness, sounds like such a toxic place to work. Stealing in the form of fixing hours would push me over the edge as well. Let's check out some comments that expose some of the seediness of the brewery industry among those that are in it for the cash alone. Someone said, an example of wage theft. It's probably one of the most common crimes in the world and very common in the States. He deserved it. Fracking criminal. Ghost Shark added, unfortunately, it's very common in the brewing industry. A lot of passionate people in the workforce get taken advantage of. Why, of course I can, shared. That's one of the problems with following your passion. Passionate workers are the easiest to mistreat. It's a huge problem in game development as well. Someone else said, as an avid home brewer myself, with a Solera, that yeast thing especially gets me. To those not in the know, yes, you can buy more yeast, if it's not terribly expensive, but if you have spent a lot of time cultivating a house strain, your beer will never be the same. Congrats on getting out. I hope you are using your talents in a better place now. No Spoilers asked, can you not freeze it like yogurt cultures? Someone else said, that's what commercial yeast labs do. But in order to do it and make use of the result, you basically need to be running your own little yeast lab, which is generally impractical for smaller breweries. That said, homebrewers sometimes do it because our batches are so much smaller that the equipment requirements aren't a problem. For example, you just need an approximate 3-liter flask and stir plate to propagate your pitch instead of a big propagator. And we don't really have to worry about constantly having yeast ready for the next brew in a tight brewing schedule. If your sanitation fails at the homebrew level, it's also not really as big a deal. You don't have to recall stuff from stores if there's a diastaticus contamination or something like that. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.